the gods of Asgard had a chance. They had a wolf cub growing up in their own home, and a prophecy that said he would one day kill Odin. They could have raised him with kindness and changed his fate. Instead, they chose fear. They chose lies. And in doing so, they created the exact monster they were afraid of, and cost one of their bravest gods his right hand. This is the binding of Fenrir, and it's really a story about how fear makes the thing it fears come true. Fenrir was one of 3 children of Loki and the giantess Angeroda, 3 children the gods had heard a dark prophecy about. The prophecy said these 3 would bring great harm to the gods at the end of the world. So the gods went and collected them. One child, the great serpent Jormungandr, Odin threw into the ocean surrounding the human world. The second, Hel, he cast down to preside over the realm of the dead. But the third, the wolf Fenrir, the gods decided to keep close, to raise him in Asgard, where they could watch him. At first, Fenrir was just a wolf cub. Manageable. And only one god was brave enough, or kind enough, to actually care for him, Tyr, the god of war and, importantly, the god of justice and oaths. Tyr fed Fenrir. Tyr was the one who approached him. There was, briefly, something like trust between them. Remember Tyr. His role in this is the heart of the tragedy. Fenrir grew. And he grew and grew, far faster and far larger than any natural wolf. Every day he was bigger, stronger, more terrifying. And as he grew, the gods watched the prophecy looming larger with him. This creature would one day be the death of Odin himself. Fear spread through Asgard. Soon the gods were too frightened to even approach Fenrir to feed him. Only Tyr still would. Now, here is the moral fork in the entire story, the choice the gods faced. Fenrir, at this point, had done nothing wrong. He was a guest in their home. He had committed no crime. The only thing against him was a prophecy about the future. The gods could have continued to treat him with the trust Tyr showed him. They could have tried to befriend the wolf, to make him an ally rather than an enemy, to perhaps change the future through kindness. Instead, they made the opposite choice. They decided the wolf was too dangerous to be free, and they resolved to bind him. Not to kill him, spilling his blood in their sacred halls was forbidden. To chain him, forever. But they were afraid to do it by force. So they decided to do it by deception. The god scheme was clever and cowardly at once. They wouldn't admit they wanted to imprison Fenrir. Instead, they'd turn it into a game, a test of strength. They forged an enormous, heavy chain called Lading, brought it to Fenrir, and challenged him, surely a wolf as mighty as you can break free of this. Fenrir, proud and confident in his strength, let them bind him. Then he flexed, strained once, and the chain shattered. The gods applauded as if delighted, but inside, they were alarmed. So they forged a second chain, Dromi, twice as strong as the first. Again they framed it as a challenge, break this, and your fame will be legendary. Fenrir looked at this heavier chain and hesitated. He could see it was no ordinary test. But his pride won. He reasoned that he'd gained nothing by sitting still, and that fame was worth some risk. He let them bind him again. This time it took everything he had. He strained and kicked, and the chain bit into him, but at last, Dromi too burst apart, the pieces flying so far they shook the ground. Now the gods were truly afraid. Brute force, even doubled, could not hold this creature. They needed something that wasn't force at all. They needed magic. The gods sent a messenger down to the dwarfs, the master craftsmen of the deep, and asked them to forge a binding that nothing could break. And the dwarfs made something extraordinary, a fetter called Gleipnir. It was not a heavy chain at all. It was thin and soft as a silk ribbon, smooth and supple, almost delicate. But it was forged from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. Because these things were used in its making, the Norse said, that is why none of them exist in the world anymore. The ribbon was unbreakable precisely because it was made of paradoxes. The gods brought Gleipnir to Fenrir on an island and, with forced cheer, offered the challenge again: break this little ribbon, and prove your strength is beyond all doubt. But Fenrir was not fooled this time. He looked at the thin, silky band and grew suspicious. Why, he reasoned, would they make such a flimsy-looking thing unless there was some trick, some magic, in it? And he said something that reveals he understood his situation completely. There is little glory in breaking such a thin ribbon, he said, but if it's made with cunning and deceit, then it will never come off my legs. So Fenrir set a condition. He would allow himself to be bound by this suspicious ribbon on one condition: that one of the gods place a hand in his mouth, as a pledge of good faith, a guarantee that there was no trickery, and that they would free him if he couldn't break loose. The gods fell silent, because every one of them knew the ribbon was a trap, which meant that whoever put their hand in Fenrir's mouth was going to lose it. They looked at each other, and no one would do it. No one, except one. Tyr stepped forward. The god of war, the god of justice and oaths, the only one who had ever fed Fenrir, the only one the wolf had any reason to trust, walked up and placed his right hand into the great wolf's jaws. And the gods bound Fenrir with Gleipnir. The wolf strained against it, as he had strained against the others. But the harder he fought, the tighter the magical ribbon held. He kicked, he twisted, he threw his whole monstrous strength against it, and Gleipnir did not break. And in that moment, Fenrir understood. He had been betrayed. The gamer was a trap, the gods had lied, and they had no intention of ever setting him free. So Fenrir did the only thing he could. He bit down. He took Tyr's right hand off at the wrist, at the very joint that is still sometimes called the wolf's joint. The gods laughed with relief that their plan had worked, all of them except Tyr, who stood there having lost his sword hand. Then they bound the thrashing wolf to a great rock deep in the earth, drove a sword through his jaws to hold them open, and left him there. And the Norse said that as Fenrir howled and slavered in his bonds, a river of foam ran from his mouth. He stays there, bound and raging, until Ragnarok, when the ribbon finally breaks, and he rises with the prophecy unfulfilled no longer, and swallows Odin whole. Now look at what this story is really saying. The gods had a prophecy that Fenrir would destroy them. They responded to that prophecy with fear, deception, and betrayal. And every single thing they did to prevent the prophecy is what guaranteed it. They taught a creature who'd done nothing wrong that the gods are liars who will chain you out of fear. They took the one being who trusted them, through Tyr, and used that trust as bait. They didn't bind a monster. They made one. If you want a reason for why Fenrir devours Odin at the end of the world, you don't have to look at fate. You only have to look at what the gods chose to do on that island. Fear of the monster created the monster. So Fenrir isn't a simple beast. He's a mirror. He's what fear and betrayal create when they're aimed at something that might have been an ally. The gods could have changed the future with trust. They chose chains, and they sealed their own doom. And one god, Tyr, paid for all of their fear with his right hand. If you want to see how this all ends, the full story of Ragnarok is waiting for you. Subscribe, and don't let your fear build your monsters.